everybody. Welcome to Hollywood Live. And again, we've got another great one for you today. I am so glad you're joining me and my guest, who is absolutely an American treasure. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. I'm talking about the one and only Sheldon Epps, who is probably the preeminent African American artistic theater director in America. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for that generous introduction.
Oh, that wasn't generous. I got to tell you, I don't fan out over too many people, but you're one of those
Oh,
people.
okay. Well,
So
thank you for
I
that
admitted
too.
it. I admitted it. Sheldon, you have a new book out, and I want to talk about that journey that you have been on. But first of all, please explain to people, because you can't assume that everybody knows what you do and what an artistic director is responsible for. What is that kind of a job?
Well, the artistic director of the theater company really defines the artistic identity of the theater. People think that it means choosing the plays and the musicals, the programming, which it does. That is very true. But I think of it as bigger than that. It's defining the relationship with the community, with other services that you want to provide, with education programs,
Mm.
after school programs, all of those things that say this is the theater that we are, beyond what we put on the stage. That included, but many other things as well.
How did this come to you as a career choice? What was it that made you just think, this is what I'm going to do? And I would almost be willing to bet that as a young child, you may not have even known about the artistic directing before. But I'm
That's
just assuming that. I don't assume
no,
anything.
no, you're very right. I probably didn't know that there was such a thing as an artistic director until I was in college when I was studying drama as an actor at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. But I was, just focused on being an actor. I didn't really know how things happened. But slowly I got some awareness of the fact that number one, there was such a thing as a theater company, a company that produces plays and keeps the theater running. And then somebody who was in charge of that, being the artistic director. Um, I really think that my emotional attachment to being an artistic director has to do with my father, who was a preacher, Presbyterian minister, who had a church here in Los Angeles on 118th Street, and he beyond wanting to do church services on Sunday, also was very interested in community service, in educational programs for the kids in the
Mm.
church, um, educational programs for adults, choirs, bands, all of those
Okay.
things. There was a lot of activity in that church beyond just church services, which
Mm.
were also great. So I think something it has something of my desire to run a theater in that way comes from him. Of course, I love producing the plays and working with the artists, but I really wanted the theater to be connected to the community and the greater LA community, as well as the Pasadena community.
Well, you certainly did that very well here, but you've done this all over the world, really. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can actually see what I'm saying here. Okay. I'm just trying to think. You've done this in Chicago. You've done this in London. You have done this in New York, of course, on Broadway. Plays
Yes.
everywhere, and when you go all over the world, it must have been. Were people ever, especially in the early days, when you would show up, say in London, as the artistic director, or even on Broadway, were people looking at you like, who is he? Who is this man?
Yes, I've definitely had that experience, both in the theater and frequently on television shows. When I did shows like Girlfriends or Sister Sister, I was at home
Hmm.
right away. But when I did Frasier and Friends and a couple of other things like that, people would sort of look a look a glance at me, askew at me, saying,
Right.
okay, how did you get here?
Yes,
What are
yes.
you doing here? So there was a bit of, having to prove yourself, having to prove that you were up to the
Hmm.
task, and as up to the task as a less colorful face, shall we
Hmm.
say. And
Hmm.
that has happened in the theater. I've frequently, we do a lot of stuff by Zoom now, so everybody knows your face. But back in the day, you would do
Right.
things by telephone, So when I would actually arrive in the building, there was sometimes a moment when people, are you Sheldon? Are you who I'm looking for? I'd say, yes, I am. So yes, there
Uh,
was some of that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Your book is titled My Own Directions: A Black Man's Journey in the American Theater. And from what I understand, you kind of wrote this memoir as almost a cathartic thing for you. Just,
Yes.
trying to express all the feelings of those kinds of things that happened to you. It must have been a very lonely journey, Sheldon.
Yes, yes. At times it was quite lonely. Um, and it was a distinct journey because at the time that I came along, there were so few artistic leaders of color. Sometimes I was one of three in the entire country. There were certain years in there when I was the only one. So as I said, you had this burden that every artistic leader has of keeping your theater alive and successful and thriving and all of that. But then as a person of color, you also have the additional burden of trying to prove to others that you can do it, and people sort of waiting for you to fail because they're not quite
Hmm.
sure how you got there in the first place,
Hmm.
or if you should be there. If it was a black theater company, that would make sense. If it was a Latino theater company and you're Latino, that makes sense. But when you're a person of color and you're leading what might be considered a white
Hmm.
organization, a white theater company, people are very, very skeptical about how that happened, if that should have happened. So they're waiting for you to mess up in some ways, and that you deserve the position, that you can do it as well as anyone else, that you can do it better than some other
Hmm.
people. Um, so it was all about that journey, particularly at Pasadena Playhouse,
Yeah.
but also at some other places. And the particular scrutiny and extra pressure that comes from being specifically a black man in the American theater, which is largely a white field that has its own forms of racism, even though that's a dirty little secret of the American theater, as I call it.
Right. So what was the biggest challenge? I mean, first of all, I have to tell people you ran the Pasadena Playhouse here in
Yes.
Southern California from 1997 to 2017 and
Yes.
provided me, as I told you earlier, some of the best date nights ever. Because that was our date night thing. We go out to the Pasadena
Good.
Playhouse, have some, dinner and a play, and it's
Unbelievable.
fabulous. And every one of them, I have to say, every one of your plays that I've ever seen, you're either laughing, crying, holding on, trying to make love, or on the edge of your seat.
Well,
You know,
great. That's exactly what you should be
that's
feeling.
that's exactly the way for people who have not experienced that. What was your biggest challenge over the years, especially here in Pasadena? Because I mean, you've done everything. You've done, I mean, everything. I can't
Yeah.
even remember all of them.
Well, I think exactly that was the biggest challenge. When I came to Pasadena Playhouse, as I said, there was some, not from everybody, but from many, skepticism and big question marks. And people kind of felt like some people felt I was going to try to turn it into Negro Ensemble Company West and do all black plays and all black shows. And that was never my intent
Mhm.
or desire. I certainly did want to diversify the fare of the theater, which was almost entirely without any color when
Right.
I
I was
got
to say before you got there, they were really white.
there. And the audience was very white. And
Hmm.
frequently, as I say in the book, I would be the only person under 60 and the only person of any color. to be going in. You may have been too, the nights you were there. Um, so I thought it was important to diversify the fare on the stage, the programming, and who was in the audience, and to represent our nation and our community. Um, so that was the biggest challenge, was to get people to understand that while I didn't want to completely overthrow the theater and do only work by artists of color, I did intend to represent everyone, all the artists in our community, the writers, the directors, the actors, and to invite new audiences in, including younger audiences.
Right, right.
So
And
there
you
was,
did just that here. You really
I
did
tried.
that. I mean, we went over the 20 years pretty much, and I mean, there was, like you said, there was so much really great material, great pithy material, great funny material, and then but all kinds of people,
Yes, good.
just everybody, all
I'm glad you
ages.
observed that.
Yeah, yeah, I really did. Was when you work in theater like that on Broadway, was there a big difference between East Coast and West Coast? I mean, were you more accepted because people were just more used to seeing perhaps a black person, say in New York on Broadway? Not that they
Well,
really were a
no,
lot, but
yeah, I wouldn't say that, when you do a show that is specifically geared towards a black audience, Dreamgirls or The Wiz or um, Play On, which I did on Broadway, uh, then it was sort of accepted and automatic, I guess. But in many of the larger not-for-profit theaters in New York City, I find them to be less diverse than Pasadena Playhouse was. I can still go to some of the larger not-for-profit theaters in New York City and often find myself the only black person in the audience, the only person of color, or one of the few. And I still lament the number of artists of color in some of those larger theaters. Um, the numbers are still low. It's still not as frequent as it should be.
it's interesting though, because when I watched the Tonys this year, it seemed like it was very, very colorful with people of color. It was, I think, I just kind of reflected and thought, gee, have I ever seen this many African Americans on the Tonys? And for a minute, I thought, am I watching the BET Awards? I mean, I thought this was the Tonys. But of course, then the production numbers are always so good when we're in them. That just
Yeah,
takes care
sure.
of itself. But so, do you think that there are more? I mean, it seems to me, I could be wrong, that there are just more theatrical productions that include black and brown people today. And also in that question, I want to talk a little bit about TV because you have done the same thing for television. And
Yeah.
that question, are there more black and brown people in the theater and on television? We certainly know that there are, but what does all that mean?
Well, first answer is definitely yes. There are certainly more, um, and over the last couple of years in the theater, just because there's been a big demand and people have raised their voices about it, it has changed a great deal.
Mhm.
So it is better. Now, you are seeing the people on the stage, not
Right.
behind the scenes.
Yes.
Where it's not always better is in the production offices, the producers of those shows, the directors of those shows, um, the managing directors of those shows, even the stage managers. Some of those behind the scenes jobs are still wanting for
Right.
people of color.
Do we have some kind of an apprenticeship so that children and young people coming up can learn these skills?
Yes, yes.
Just what is there out there for young kids who are looking at you, and they start looking at you and reading your book and like, oh wow, where can they go to get this knowledge?
Yes, those programs definitely do exist now. I personally work on the board of the Stage Directors Foundation, which has internship programs and fellowship programs. There are programs now for stage managers. I was just reading this morning, the Schubert Organization has established a fellowship for people of color, young people of color, to learn to be Broadway producers.
Mm,
But again, this is over the last couple of years,
yeah.
finally, this is happening after decades and decades of no opportunities or few opportunities, or in my case, one opportunity.
Right. But you've had a wonderful, I mean, hopefully you've had a wonderful life because you've certainly put that out to the rest of us
I,
with your productions. But I got to ask you, Sheldon, what moment stands out where, it may have been difficult or it may have just been so triumphant where you had to look at yourself and say, wow.
there were a few of those. One was certainly our production at the Playhouse of Fences with Lawrence Fishburne and Angela Bassett and Wendell Pierce,
Yes.
who's on Broadway right now, and Death of a Salesman, where we just took not just a great Black play, but a great American play by August Wilson, and just did a splendid job of it because I was so lucky to get this superlative cast who just turned it into something monumental. So that was certainly one. Being in the same room with Diane Carroll and Felicia Rashad, both in our production of Blue, um,
Yes.
and the production of 12 Angry Men, which took a very specific approach to what was always the racial undertone of that play. But I cast it with 6 Black men and 6 white men. And that kind of exploded it and lifted it into something very, very special, I thought.
What's next for you? What are you working on now?
Well, I've just done my first TV movie, which is coming on middle of November for BET, a holiday movie called Christmas Party Crashers,
Oh,
uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
which premieres November 17th. Then I just did a play in Houston called Miss Maud. That's about the relationship between a very famous Life magazine photographer and Black Southern nurse midwife, Maud Callan. And
Hmm.
their work together established a whole revolution in maternal care for poor Black and poor white women that really changed the mortality statistics and really improved maternal care.
Hmm.
So that was very moving, and hopefully we'll have a chance to do that again.
When we look at the political climate of America today, and we've been around long enough to understand how arts play into society and culture, and how important it is, and how the images that you see will oftentimes direct the way you vote.
Yeah,
Just because I
right,
mean that's just real.
right.
So, in our current political climate, what is it that people need to do, or what play or what TV show or shows right now would you suggest that people watch just to kind of open their minds?
Anything that's about healing rather than division and violence. I think we're bombarded with how separated we are, with how um, combative everything is right now, politically, certainly, but even socially, and constant shootings and all of that. That's the noise that makes the noise. So
Hmm.
we need stories about healing. We need stories about the fact that in big moments and in private moments, we really do live together and take care of each other very, very well. So we need to tell those stories as often as we can. That's what Miss Maud was about. These two
Mm.
very disparate characters who came together and really healed each other and did miraculous things. So I'm all for telling those kind of stories at the moment.
What what production, and I'm talking about theatrical now, what is the one that you have not done yet that you are just saying, I've got to do this, that's on your bucket list?
Oh, um, there's a musical version of Raisin in the Sun called Raisin,
Yes.
which actually won the Tony Award many, many years ago. Joe Morton, a wonderful actor, was in the original cast. Debbie Allen was actually in the original cast. And for some reason, though it was a big success and it was a Tony Award winner, it's not done very often. I think somewhat out of respect for the play. And I respect the play as well. But it's really a wonderful musicalized version of Lorraine Hansberry's play.
Yeah.
So that's one that I'd love to get to before I hustle off.
Yeah, well, hopefully you're not hustling off anytime too soon because you got a lot of stuff yet to do.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Sheldon,
ma'am.
thank you so much. And everybody can get your book. Again, it's called My Own Directions, A Black Man's Journey in the American Theater. Where can we find that? I'm sure on Amazon and the other places.
Yes, Amazon Books. Also, you can get it directly from the publisher, McFarland Books.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, good luck with that. Are you going to be, and I don't even know what's happening. You know, that we had a pandemic, duh. And so I don't even know what's happening out there. Is the Pasadena Theater back open again?
Yes, it is. It
is.
They're doing a Sondheim festival of about 4
okay.
or 5 Sondheim shows starting in the spring.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's open and doing very well.
Good. Well, I hope you get back over there sometime soon. And if not, I'll have to catch you someplace else. I'll come to New York and check you out.
All right.
Thank you so much, Sheldon Epps. And like I said, an American treasure you are. And everybody is about to know it when they read this book. And for everybody out there, thank you so much. And don't forget, take care of yourself and somebody else. Have a great day.